Item: SCP-780. Object Class: Safe. Special Containment Procedures: SCP-780 must be kept in a locked steel box 10 cm x 10 cm x 10 cm, with walls at least 1 cm thick. This box is to be kept on a 5-meter pedestal, at the center of a 20-meter x 20-meter concrete room. Individuals wishing to approach SCP-780 must submit to a full-body search, and may not bring plants, living or artificial, images of plants, descriptions of plants, or digital displays of any kind within 10 meters of SCP-780 except as part of a pre-approved test protocol. Individuals with plant tattoos are likewise forbidden from approaching SCP-780 except during testing. Description: SCP-780 is a small bead, 1 cm in diameter, shaped like a rounded gem with numerous facets and a hole at its center. It appears to be made of a clear amorphous substance. Studies suggest it has a structure similar to that of polyvinyl chloride, but this does not account for its reaction to plants. While SCP-780 does not melt at temperatures exceeding 3500 K, cooling it to below 24 K temporarily changes its structure into a crystalline form, allowing it to be damaged by blunt impacts. When a plant or representation of a plant, including artificial plants, photographs of plants, drawings and paintings of plants, particularly vivid textual descriptions of plants, or any of the above appearing on a screen of any sort, is placed within 10 meters of SCP-780, it begins to levitate and will fly towards the plant. How SCP-780 detects plants is unknown at this time. If restrained, SCP-780 will become increasingly agitated until the plant is removed from its radius. If allowed to come into contact with the plant, hereafter the host plant, SCP-780 will stick to it for a period of 5 seconds, at which time it will fall to the floor. Once it lays flat against the ground, it cannot be removed except as noted below. Within 10 minutes, a shoot will be seen growing from within the hole at the center of SCP-780. This will mature to a fully grown specimen of the host plant within 24 hours. This new plant is designated SCP-781. Even if the host plant was not a living, physical plant, SCP-781 will be, though in all other traits, color, height, general form, it will match the depiction of the host plant. SCP-781 has the same requirements for sun and atmosphere as the host plant, but does not have a root system, and therefore does not require water or any particular soil conditions. Despite lacking roots, SCP-781 will not fall over regardless of imbalance or pressure applied. Attempts to dig up the ground SCP-781 sits on result in data expunged. SCP-781 is equally susceptible to damage as the host plant. Anything which would kill the host plant will also kill SCP-781. Upon its death, it will rot unusually quickly, and SCP-780 may be retrieved. At maturity, each instance of SCP-781 produces new copies of SCP-780. In flowering plants, the copies are found at the base of each flower, usually replacing the ovary. In non-flowering plants, the copy replaces seeds, spores, or other such propagules. Each reproductive structure, flower, cone, spore capsule produces exactly one copy of SCP-780. When SCP-781 portrays a plant species that does not undergo sexual reproduction, a single new copy of SCP-780 forms at the base of SCP-781. These new copies of SCP-780 will break out of SCP-781 and affix to the nearest plant not generated by SCP-780, or remain inert if no such plant exists within their radius. Flowers or seeds removed from SCP-781 before maturation contain smaller, misshapen copies of SCP-780, which do not react to plants in any way.